Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. I hope your day and your week are going very well so far. The NFL Week 17 is officially here, and with that, we get a little Christmas treat with a little Wednesday Christmas football action between the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. I, of course, have some picks to go ahead and share with you guys. But first, as always, people, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. It helps the channel grow, and it really does mean a ton to us. With a new day and a new week comes some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. Guys, we got a pretty solid game here. Pretty solid Christmas slate. Ev obviously covered the Chiefs-Steelers game in a separate video. I'm covering the Ravens-Texans game in this video. I've got a couple picks to go ahead and share with you guys, but I like this game a lot. It's obviously some playoff implications with playoff seeding and whatnot. You got two of the bigger powerhouse teams of the AFC going head-to-head, so we got a really fun little treat here on Christmas. Before I go ahead and share my picks for this game, let's go ahead and break it down a little bit and talk about the matchup, the two teams coming into this game. So we're going to jump over to the NFL dashboard. If you guys aren't a member of Guy Boston Sports, the community, we do give this monthly dashboard. Ev creates, I can't take all the credit. Ev does create this, where he goes around, gives us all the advanced data, the DVOA stuff, as well as the overall numbers for each individual matchup. So here we have the dashboard for this game, and we got a pretty solid spot here. These are two really solid teams. Look at the DVOA rankings for both these teams. These are two of the best defenses in the NFL in terms of DVOA. The Baltimore Ravens 10th overall, fifth defense against the run in terms of DVOA, 14th against the pass. Houston, the number one defense in the NFL this year in terms of DVOA. First against the pass, third against the run. So you have two really solid defenses going head-to-head. Now, Baltimore offensively has been really solid all year long. They're technically ranked in terms of DVOA, the number one ranked offense in the NFL this season, both in pass and run. So a really solid offensive team. Houston, not so much. 24th overall in offense, 24th in passing, 27th in running. A lot of reasons for this. Number one, injuries. Obviously, we know Tank Dell just got hurt their last game out against Kansas City. So there, some injuries to the wide receiver room. It feels like all year long this has been the case, right? Nico Collins missed some time. Tank Dell had already been hurt earlier the year. Stephon Diggs out for the season. So injuries have affected this offense. You also have an offensive line that's just not playing all that great. If we jump over to the outlier screen, spoiler alert for my pick for this game. Houston overall this year, offensive line-wise, they've not been very good. Tied for 27th in sacks allowed, tied for 22nd in QB hits, 32nd in QB hurries, 32nd in tackles for loss. Moral of the story, this offensive line is just plain not good, and that obviously has affected the passing game. It's affected the running game. Joe Mixon's also been hurt for a little bit this season. Overall, we just have a case of two teams that right now are going in different directions. Baltimore, obviously, they just come off a really massive win against the Steelers on Saturday. It was kind of their, you could honestly argue it's their biggest win of the season thus far. Massive win for the division stuff, playoff implications, all that good stuff. And they didn't just beat Pittsburgh, they handled Pittsburgh in that game. 34-17 was the final score of that one. And then Houston, they're coming off a loss versus Kansas City. Again, I mentioned they lost Tank Dell in that game. They lost the game outright. So you have two teams kind of coming off of different things, coming into this game with different feelings. Baltimore obviously feeling probably a little more happy, a little more hopeful. Houston probably feeling a little more disappointed, a little more down. You do see overall this year, Baltimore, a 57.10% cover rate against the spread. Houston, just 46.2% cover rate against the spread this season. So you have these two teams that, Baltimore's having a little bit of a better year. Houston, although they're still a good team, they are definitely not as hot as I think people thought they were, or as good as they were even last season. And so going off of all that, guys, my first pick in today's video, I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens on the spread here, -4. Now, the actual line in this game is 5.5 points. I'm going to knock a 1.5 down, get it from -4, and the value is pretty good there. -125 on Bet365, -130 ESPN Bet. You can still find this line for a pretty decent value, -4. I don't hate the line of -5.5, but if you can get it at -4 for like -125, -130, you might as well get it for that value. I just like Baltimore a little bit more in this spot going into this game. One of the best defenses in the NFL in terms of DVOA, and their offense is also the best in terms of DVOA. So on both sides of the ball, they're really good. Yes, they do have a little bit of weakness in their secondary. We know their pass defense is not great. And DVOA rankings, they're 14th. Overall, you look at here on the defensive side of things for their overall data, their overall averages on the year. They're 31st in passing yards allowed, giving up almost 255 passing yards per game this season, which obviously isn't very good, but overall, yeah, their pass defense leaves something to be desired, but they have been getting better over the last couple weeks. And if we go back to the dashboard here, we can see the difference in Baltimore's defense over the last 3 games. Look at the averages here. Points per game, they're actually 5th in the NFL in points per game over the last 3 games. Now, granted, they played the Giants and the Steelers in some of those games. But overall, you see the Baltimore defense tied for 18th in scoring overall this year, giving up 23.3 points per game. Over the last 3 games, they're going up just 18.3 points per game. And they're actually the 3rd best defense in the NFL over the last 3 games in terms of passing yards allowed. So a major difference from their overall numbers. Again, they're going up against Russell Wilson, Drew Lock. If it wasn't even Drew Lock, it was, I don't know, somebody. And then obviously the Eagles, which was the one kind of good offense they played. But overall, really good numbers here for Baltimore. A lot of encouraging things. For Houston, again, teams going in different directions. Houston, the last 3 games, his offense has been putrid. 20.7 points per game, just 23rd in the NFL over the last 3. Bottom 5 in passing yards, bottom 5 in rushing yards. You see a lot of bad numbers there for Houston over the last 3 games. Even their defense, which has kind of been their saving grace, even their defense has fallen off a tad bit. Still pretty good overall, but over the last 3 games, you do see some of their defensive metrics have dropped a tad bit. Overall, I still like the Houston defense overall. Just in this spot, you can see they're trending in a little bit of a bad spot here. But yeah, I think this is a case of Baltimore. This is a team that's coming into this game with a little bit of more momentum, coming off of some big wins. You look at the insights provided by Outlier as well. The Ravens are 8-3, 72.7% hit rate against the spread in their last 11 games on the road. I just think Baltimore is the better team in this spot. I think Houston, they have a lot to figure out here with the Tank Dell injury. This offense is getting thinner and thinner, and again, the offensive line stuff is not going to make this any easier. Baltimore also pretty decent pass rush. They're tied for 2nd in the NFL in sacks per game, 2nd in QB hits, so a pretty decent pass rush in Baltimore against a Texans offensive line that's just not that good. Been a rough year for Houston. I just think Baltimore is the better team overall in this spot on both sides of the ball. Houston, I think, is the better defensive team overall, but their offense is just so inefficient this year compared to Baltimore's offense, which is the most efficient offense in the NFL this season. So I like Baltimore here on the spread, -4. And then for my next pick, guys, I'm going with the player prop that I really like in this game. We're going Joe Mixon under 66.5 rushing yards for the Houston Texans. We're getting this one for -119 on Prize Picks. So we'll go ahead and adjust that there. We'll go 64.5. It doesn't matter. 2 yards is not going to change this for me. We're going to go Joe Mixon under 64.5 rushing yards, which is -113 on FanDuel. A little bit better there. Under 64.5 rushing yards on FanDuel here for Joe Mixon. And I know at first glance it may not look great, but I'm telling you the matchup is worth taking his under here. Now overall this year, just a 42% cover rate on the under for Joe Mixon, averaging 80.58 rushing yards per game this season. But if we narrow that down to the last 5 games, you see a 60% hit rate over the last 5 games, averaging just 62.4 rushing yards per game over the last 5. So you do see that the under has been cashing more consistently. He's been having some pretty rough games over the last month or so for Houston. And again, this is a matchup that he's not going to really be happy with here. The Baltimore Ravens, #1 rush defense in the NFL in terms of rushing yards allowed, giving just 83.1 rushing yards per game, versus running backs, 2nd best rushing defense in the NFL, giving just 65.4 rushing yards per game. And again, going back to the dashboard, we remember the DVOA rankings. Baltimore 5th best run defense in the NFL in terms of DVOA. Over here, we have DVOA adjusted for defense versus position. So we go ahead and see how these defenses fare against certain positions. You see the Baltimore Ravens, when they go up against opposing running backs, you see a -8, which means their overall, let's say, production dips by 8% when they face off with the Baltimore Ravens. So Baltimore's defense against the run has been really, really solid over the last 3 games as well. We look at their defense rushing yards allowed per game, 10th best in the NFL, just 104 yards per game over their last 3 games. So it's a really solid spot. We also have Joe Mixon here, a little insight provided by Outlier. Let's go back to the 64.5 line here. Joe Mixon has failed to exceed 61.5. So we have it 64.5. He's failed to exceed 61.5 rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games at home. He's averaging just 43.6 rushing yards per game over his last 5 home games, an 80% hit rate. And you see some really low running totals when he's played at home this season. Really good value, and I could see this game going in a direction where Houston's going to be trailing, and they're going to have to throw the football. They may not be able to lean into the running game like they'd like to. And again, Mixon just kind of been inconsistent over the last month or so with the ground game, so I like his under here in rushing yards, 64.5. And then for my final pick, as I always do for these single game videos, guys, I like to do these anytime touchdown player giveaways. The contest is simple. Comment the name of the player, whether it be his last name, his first name, or his whole name combined. Comment down below, and if this touchdown player prop hits, one lucky commenter will get a free $25 Amazon gift card. So we're going with Nico Collins here, anytime touchdown, which we're getting for +140 on FanDuel. And again, this is just a great matchup going back to the dashboard. Like we saw earlier, obviously in DVOA, the Ravens, although they have a solid defense overall versus the pass, they are 14th. Now we have seen their defense is getting a little bit better over the last 3 games. Baltimore's pass defense, actually, they're still giving up a ton of, that's actually, I think, overall, sorry, the last 3 games, excuse me, yeah. They are getting better. third in passing yards allowed over the last three games, so they are getting a little bit better. But if we scroll down below here to defense versus position, you see versus number one wide receivers, their usage percentage or their performance increases by 46% when facing against this Baltimore defense. So Baltimore is getting creamed. They're getting cooked by these number one wide receivers. If we go over here, overall touchdowns against the Baltimore Ravens are 14th overall in the NFL, but versus wide receivers, they're 27th. They give up 1.2 touchdowns per game to opposing wide receivers. We've seen number one wide receivers have massive performances against the team, specifically Jamar Chase. Players like him have had field days against this Ravens defense, and it makes sense as the worst pass defense in the NFL in terms of yards per allowed, second worst, I should say, overall on the season. It's a really good spot. Nico Collins overall this year, a 50% hit rate, 5 of 10 games this year. He's cashed the over, averaging 0.6 touchdowns per game. We also have the insights provided by Outlier. Nico Collins has exceeded half a touchdown in 6 straight games at home. So each of his last 6 home games, he's cashed this over, 100% hit rate, averaging 1.17 touchdown receptions per game at home. And his last time out, we saw him. He had 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins at home on December 15th. And obviously, we know the targets. Now, with Tank Dell being out, he's clearly the number one receiver in this offense. These numbers would be higher for Nico Collins if he himself hadn't missed time with injury. So an 18% target share overall. That will obviously increase now that Tank Dell is gone. Obviously, Diggs took a good percentage too, but he's also out. Red zone targets, Nico Collins is number 1 with a 22.2% target share. Again, you see who number 2 was, Tank Dell. He is gone. So Nico Collins is really the one guy that CJ Stroud can still continue to go to and trust. I like him a lot in this spot. For plus 142, really good value for all that information I gave you guys. The data looks pretty solid. So, all right, guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. One more time, guys, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you enjoy your holiday, enjoy Christmas football. Usually, I consider Christmas with basketball, but obviously the NFL, they take over everything, and they're starting to take over Christmas as well. I'll be looking forward to some basketball and some football on Christmas Day. As always, guys, I enjoy this community, talking to you guys, getting to interact with you guys. I'm thankful all year long for you guys, not just around the holidays, but thank you very much for the constant support all year long. Enjoy your holidays. Have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again soon. But until then, I hope you're all winners. Have a Merry Christmas.